Om Shanti. Today I thought we would do the ladder because it's a vital part of seeing how the soul, the human soul, actually digresses and goes through a state of devolution rather than evolution, from a state of complete happiness at the beginning of its time period right to the end of its time period when there is an abundance of sorrow and the mind is a very sorrowful place to dwell in or to be connected to. So in a sense we, in our physical lives, we have this ladder put in front of us where we become little babies, and then as we grow we become educated, and then we've got this question, what do you want to become when you leave school, and what do you want to do with your life? And of course there's all these different external influences where people are seen who are quite wealthy, and we start to believe that the wealth has happiness within it, and of course we've got this ladder of success put in front of us. Nice concept really, when you can actually just do a living, make a living in namesake, but actually not allow it to take over your life, because obviously if that's living, then all your self-respect and self-worth will come from your life of an external nature, the external ladder of success, where they say look out who you tread on as you get to the top, because you've got to meet those people when you come down again. So in a sense that's a ladder that's been going on throughout many lives now, where we have achievements, success, ambitiousness, but this is the ladder, the total story, the complete story of the human soul that take the maximum lives in a world drama cycle. So not everyone will understand this, because not everyone goes through the whole cycle, and if someone hasn't got that history behind them, if they haven't gone through that highest point of the golden age to the lowest point of the iron age, then they won't have the complete story. So in other words, if they came in a time period where some level of happiness, complete happiness, was lost, then they'd only be able to relate to happiness and sorrow, and therefore they'll be saying that, you can't have one without the other, which is true in a way, because we're removing the sorrow now to create total happiness, and that total happiness will last for thousands of years. So in a sense it's true, because unless you've got that sorrow, you wouldn't be studying, you wouldn't be searching for that inner happiness. Whether it be the heart's been broken so many times and the heart's become quite fragile, so we look for a total state of love, whether it be happiness or whether it be a total peaceful state. We try to create our own heaven in this life also, but our concept of heaven will differ incredibly so, from one end of a spectrum to another. So the souls that come late into the cycle of birth and rebirth and possibly only have one or two roles to play in the whole drama cycle, then they would only be related to the happiness of the material world, the physical nature, their image. And of course, at the beginning of time, where Lakshmi and Narayan ruled, or Adam and Eve's era, when there was this complete, total state of happiness, is a purity of soul and body. So, in other words, the story begins at the top of the ladder, and because it's such a gradual deterioration, it's almost unfair to call it a ladder, really. It would be best to be a very, very slight gradient on a slope where the deities are using and enjoying their happiness. So it's like as their state of mind, so the matter, so the world reflects that complete blissful state. The fruits, the vegetables, the nature, the animals, the whole world is vibrating with happiness. Quite hard to actually grab a hold of and to perceive that way of being, if you like, but that's the whole point. The soul is being. And so it's not the human being, it's the deity being, because the virtues are coursing through the consciousness from inside to out. There's happiness. What we do, we play, we dance, we sing, everything's unlike my vocal cords. Now our vocal cords will be according to the soul's karma. Our sense organs are according to our karma. So everything about the human soul has become perfected. So therefore everything of the physical nature is in a perfect state. It's been created by God's knowledge. God's knowledge has changed the human soul from a state of devilish to divine, from vicious to viceless. And so because that divinity is working for us, we don't have to try to get it from the outside world. So we're not playing our role to be happy of an external nature. We'd be playing our role to enjoy the flow, because the flow takes place when the soul is in matter. Without matter, the soul can't do anything. It's in an inert state. So the soul, once it comes into matter, its role starts to be expressed through the physical sense organs. So we're living from inside to out, not outside to in. And at the beginning of time, the lion and the lamb, as it says in the Bible, drink at the same water point, because the self-respect of the human soul, which is the lion, and the humility of the human soul, which is the lamb, is actually working for us. They're not actually in conflict with each other. They work in perfect balance, in perfect harmony. So because we haven't got a little word called stress, because we haven't got a little word called fear, and there's no anxiety, because the soul's in a mastery state, it's the master of matter. It doesn't seek to own anything. Whenever someone's a master, they naturally move away from the ownership of matter, and all the matter doesn't matter, because the soul is in a mastery state. When it's a slave to matter and a slave to the sense organs of the body, the sensory, physical sensory perceptions, then it's pulled by the external, what it sees, what it hears, what it touches, what it says, and even the nose, which is the curiosity to see what things feel like, to see what sensations they can get, is all to do with the curiosity of our nose. So the five sense organs are all active much, much later on when the soul, the human soul, has deteriorated. As I said, the souls that didn't come in that time period won't have this history, so it's not his story. It's everyone else's story that was there, but it's not everyone's story. So that's not really their time period. That wouldn't really suit them. But for the deity souls, that level of happiness that they basically earned from this time, because shortly after this time becomes that time. So once this time is being established, the world of golden age takes place with your golden thoughts, your pure thoughts, your elevated thoughts, your blame culture has been removed, the actual cynicism and untrustworthiness that goes, in the suspiciousness of others has been removed. So for that reason the soul is worthy of that time. So it's as the mind, so the matter will be. So it's not something I can do a bit of kidology about, if I'm holding this negativity instead of letting it go. We say let go and let God. So just keep letting go of any negativity that comes along, and your golden consciousness will start to emerge again. Because the souls have a golden consciousness, the bodies are not stressed, so therefore they live to approximately 150 years of age. The soul knows when it's about to leave the body and sheds the body like a snake shedding its skin and moves swiftly into its next costume. There probably isn't even a word for my in that world, because possessiveness and possessions is a loving community, a happy community, a peaceful community. Many communities have claimed to be happy communities, loveful communities, peaceful communities, but there's always something that comes to test the soul when there's on the level of possessiveness, because they still own, because those souls are in a body conscious state in this part of the cycle, the latter part of the cycle, so that's why their kingdom always falls. And that's the problem with the kingdoms in the golden age, when the soul is slowly losing its happiness, its storeroom of happiness, its stockroom of happiness. It is still in a most elevated state, so remains in that pristine state. So when it comes time to leave their kingdom, then it will pass it on. It will pass it over from one master to another, from one master to another, like that. And so the kingdom's being passed down, whereas later on in the ladder, the soul is actually fighting for its kingdom. So this is quite an interesting aspect of how divinity does something, a soul-conscious state does something, and how a body-conscious state does something. So in that time period, those souls don't call out for God, there's no worship of God, there's no worship of the elements, because the worship of the elements takes place when the soul is in bondage to matter, and those souls have removed the bondages of matter in their past life. And so for that reason, they spend 2,500 years in a paradise, a utopia, and it isn't until that energy of happiness, that storeroom of fortune has run out of this period of time. See, there's no idols, there's no God, there's nothing going on there. The soul is in a pure state of divine happiness amongst the pure state of divine people. And we can relate to this even now, is as soon as you connect to someone's quality in them, their beauty in them, then you pour that in front of them into the atmosphere, and the atmosphere starts to improve between the souls, no matter how bad someone appears to be, with anger, with lust, with jealousy, with cynicism, with one-upmanship, with competitiveness, with anger and greed and all those negatives. If you can see the spark of goodness in that soul, that quality, then that starts to create a good vibration between the souls. And in the Golden Age and the Silver Age, the souls are abundant in goodness. So the goodness actually doesn't run out and can't be tested, because one, there's nothing to test the goodness, and also the goodness is full. There's no opposite. There's happiness, there's no sorrow. That seed of sorrow has been burnt in the fire of love. So where there's love, pure love, uncontaminated love, it becomes a seed of power which removes the seed of power of sorrow. So anyway, the Silver Age is a little bit different, because the level of qualities, the actual degrees of divinity have become slightly less, but hey-ho. So until we actually come to the Copper Age, the Copper Age is a time period where the soul comes into a state of duality. So it starts to do the form of worship. And at first, because the soul's still very subtle, it would only worship one god, Shiva, the oval image, the being. It only remembers that being at that time because the soul is no longer beyond the complete influence of matter. So it relates to the being that is beyond the effect, almost like a memory of how we were, but in the body, is triggered by the one that doesn't have the body. So we start to worship a past feeling about ourselves. That's that I'm remembering that I was beyond the effect, so I look beyond this world where the effect is taking place. So at first it's subtle, very subtle, in the sense of an oval image. There's nothing physical, there's no angelic form, subtle form connected, just the one, like sun god, if you like. Sun god, sorry about my voice. So then it moves, as the soul continues, that slows the decline, so that the decline is not too quick, and then it will worship like Brahma, Vishnu, Shankar, Lakshmi, Narayan, and then it will digress and digress to the elements, the gurus, the trees, the nature, the animals, everything. It's moving away as the human consciousness becomes more affected, it becomes less effective. And so, although these different forms of worship are taking place. You've even got the worship of the TV right at the bottom, where people forget that it's got an on and off switch. They call it some call it the deity who sits in the corner. And you've even got the worship of money, the worship of power. It still means the soul is in bondage to that thing, worshipping that thing, so is affected by that thing. So if the thing I worship is insulted, then I'll feel insulted because it's become part of my identity. So the soul had its true identity, beautiful state of divine deity, gods and goddesses with small g's, and now it's lost its divinity to its vices. It keeps acting on the vices which bring temporary happiness and more sorrow, so it ties itself in the bondage of the vices more and more. And in England, a vice is something that holds you, and it won't let it go. You're tying it up on a piece of wood to cut the wood, and it's a vice. And it's interesting where that word came from, because that's what vices do. All vices of a sensual nature. You can't actually remove those, like you can't replace the love of the physical until you've got the love of the spiritual. You can't remove the happiness of the physical until you've got the happiness of the spiritual. You can't remove the peace of being in a certain place with certain people until you're touching your true nature of peace, living with it, thinking with it, speaking with it, acting under the influence of it. So all the peace, happiness and love that the soul's looking for, until it's spiritualized, the physical will remain, the material will remain. So we get to this point where we get the gift of the lift, by what we call the gift of the lift. You don't have to walk all that way up the ladder again to the very top to become your most elevated, high state of being again, because you're getting the gift of the lift. In other words, let go and let God. Allow God to start working through you so that you no longer feel the burden of everything that you do, everything that you say. You know, there's no more people pleasing. That comes to an end because you're not under your own influence. You're under God's influence. And there's a word in Raj Yoga which is called Karan Karavan Ha, which means that God is being allowed by the human soul to work through them to get their work done. So there's no question of the ego that is so much involved in how good you do, how good you didn't do. There's none of this trying to please others, nor please my own ego as well. I'm actually trying to ship it out, to get rid of it, so that I can experience the pure self-worth that God is giving the human soul. And the soul starts to feel His presence the more and more you make yourself into an instrument. So whenever there's problems, just give them over to the Supreme Being, Baba, because He's the one that has the power to deal with all problems. Our problems are quite small compared to what happens in the whole cycle, the whole world being uplifted, because every human soul, and each soul comes at their own time, will be uplifted by God, because He forgets no one and uplifts everyone. So we'll no doubt, as time goes on, do a question and answer on this recording, But for now, that's just the way the soul needs to understand things, that it's not the Darwinism where we move from the amoeba to a human being. It's actually going from the highest form to the lowest form of the human being. The human being with all 5 vices: lust, anger, ego, greed and attachment, which were once peace, love, happiness, purity and power. So we'll do a meditation to finish off with, and have a nice day. I turn myself away from the world outside to my inner world of peace and light. I give my mind peace and light, and allow the mind to begin to flow with peace and light. I invoke my perfect form, my angelic form of light that has no weaknesses and has let go of the ownership of weaknesses. I no longer have the nature to believe in fear, and so the fear falls away. I no longer believe in guilt. It isn't something that is mine, and so I let it go. I no longer believe in anger. It isn't mine to own, even though I've been using it. Still, I let it go. And as I let go, I feel God's goodness flowing from beyond to Mother Earth and throughout my physical body. And my physical body becomes like an orb of light around me as God recreates my angelic form within the physical form, the physical dimension. I realise that the story was all about light and dark, and light and heavy, and now my mind, my form of body, is double light, light in nature, light in weight. I am light. All my brothers and sisters of the world are light. Why to even think of a physical body at all? Om Shanti.